Hey friends, welcome to part 2 of the Intro to Shaping Bases, class 5 of the Crease Pattern series. And today we are going to be shaping up this base, the baby white scorpion, into this guy. And now we're taking the approach again of shaping like the designer shaped, really to practice our precision and just kind of see where our entry-level shaping skills are. The other thing is, this might help people identify what to actually do once you have a base. And while box pleat is much more evident than 22.5 models, sometimes it still gets a little confusing, especially when it comes to smaller details like claws or tails or whatnot. So if you haven't folded a base of this yet, I recommend you do so. 24 grid, fairly simple. All these structures I've taught in previous classes. It's also a really fun collapse. So go ahead and do that. Now I'm using Agua Papel, which is quite a nice paper. Not too expensive. I made a review video on this paper if you want to see the upper limits of what this paper can handle. But I do recommend at least using either 25 centimeter kami or a nicer 30 centimeter. This is a 30 centimeter sheet. Around 30 centimeter sheet of paper to do this. As we're moving into more of a complex field, you really want to up your paper game. If you haven't upped your paper game yet, that is something you should learn. And I know this is also a really hard step for a lot of people, but if you're looking to get into this advanced complex origami, it's good to have a decent paper for it. I agree, sure, you can use A4 paper and kami all you want for, a lot of complex models, but when you want to upgrade your level and upgrade the looks of it, oftentimes that requires upgrading your paper. You guys might have seen some Kamikaze videos before with that 25 centimeter kami. That you can get a lot of good results out of, but it takes a lot of effort. And you risk tearing a ton. So if you want to avoid some frustration, practice making double tissue, practice, treating paper. If you live in America, you have no excuse for not being able to get good paper for pretty cheap. There's tons of papers online that I show. It's unreal, like this you can get for like $3. But yeah, reach out to me, reach out to other advanced folders for questions about how to buy this paper. And if you're not old enough to buy it yet and your parents need to buy it, just ask us for the reliable sources and then you can check in with your parents. But yeah, so let's get into shaping. All right, so where do we begin with shaping? Now, Ricardo's design is quite unique. I really like the shaping he has here. It's I think this is both cute and cool, especially for a scorpion. And it's fairly different than a lot of other scorpion designs. You either see scorpions of this kind of style, but without legs, or you see much more complex scorpions with crazy 48 grid pleat, half pleat transition, all that crazy stuff. But this is a nice in between. And I think the way he shaped it is remarkable. And while it seems simple to get nearly this result, is a little bit more difficult than meets the eye, yet is extremely good practice to try to achieve. So I think it's perfect for this class as we're exploring. And I think by practicing this, you guys can all level up your shaping a little bit. Win-win in all scenarios. All right, so what do we want to do first? We can really do anything first. However, I'd say any kind of 3D shaping, you want to do that last, as it's really easy to accidentally undo it while you're shaping other things. So like if we did the tail first, there'd be a good chance we accidentally flattened the tail midway doing like the legs or the body. So let's not start with that first. Let's see what normal folds we can get before doing anything. And what stands out to me, obviously, and probably to you, is these mandibles here. Those are obviously these, but thinned out. And then the legs. The legs aren't quite as thick as 1 units. It looks like he folded in not quite half, but maybe a third, a little bit. Might make sense to do half just for the body length. So yeah, that's also a really simple one. We'll just fold all these in half and be good to go there. And then we'll get into the claws a little bit later. Those require just a little bit more details. I'll give you guys some pointers for those. But for now, let's just do the easy stuff. All right, so let's start with the mandibles. We'll get kind of everything else out of the way so we can focus. And now the first thing to notice is there's a small little gap, and these aren't 45-degree angles. So obviously a good starting place would be to just fold these into 45 angles just because they fit super easily into the model already. So you can just kind of squash fold it in by spraying those layers, or you can pre-crease and reverse fold just to be extra precise. I'm just kind of going quick here, right, like that. But you notice his are a little bit thinner than that. And while this picture isn't as high res, I have this linked so you can go check it out for yourself. But this part is slightly folded in, obviously for details purposes. So we can do that as well. So we're just going to take the top layer first and mount and fold it. There's no real reference, but you can either fold it to a 22.5 degree angle or just kind of eyeball it like I'm doing. Obviously, keep your fold clean. That's what you're going to want. You don't want to ruin the paper just because the texture's nice, right? Thin that side out. And then this bottom part, I can thin this out as well just by folding below. You can fold inside. You can kind of do whatever just to thin this guy out. Right, and then we get a mandible that's very similar here. And now you can see there's also a little gap here. So I'm not going to do the other side yet. But obviously, you can just kind of shimmy these guys away, aim it down a little bit, curl it out, and you'll get a small little gap between them. We'll go into those smaller details in the final shaping, again, because a lot of times you'll undo it accidentally by, just doing the other things. All right, so we did that. You guys go ahead, do the other side. But to save time, we're going to move on to the legs. All right, friends, so we finished this area, and now the legs probably look a lot more in shambles than we last saw. This is take 2. I messed up the first take around. I thought I messed up first time, but I actually was right the first time, and I just messed things up. But basically, we're onto the legs. All we're going to do, we're just going to fold them in half, and we want these seams to be all right. So we're going to mount and fold all these legs this way. And now you kind of want to be careful when you're doing this as to avoid paper creep. And that's where all these layers start to slide when you fold something in half, just because the paper might be getting a little bit thicker. But yeah, so fold these as precise as possible. Try to get some nice looking legs. Pretty simple. I'm just going to complete all these and do all that, and we'll get to the next steps. All right, so we got all the legs folded in half. Show it a little bit here so you guys can see. Right? And now we're not at the exact same angle as Ricardo's, but we can kind of get the gist of what's going to happen. And that is around halfway-ish, maybe a little bit past. It's just a mountain fold down on the leg to get it to bend like that. And you can see he curls the other part up, and it forms a leg kind of like that. right? Now, depending on the paper you use, will determine how resistive this is. As you can see, this leg is falling, but I'll kind of go into what happens after that. For now, we're just going to get these mountain folds in, find the right proportion. I'm moving mine up a little bit like that, and get to it. So again, this is pretty trivial. Go ahead, do this for all the legs, and then come back and we'll get into more of what next to think about. All right, so we got the legs all mountain folded here. As you can see, I just angled it up a little bit to kind of reference the crease here. Now, like I said, it's not going to stay while we finish the rest of the model. And you can see we have a lot of layers just sticking up right here. We're going to worry about this later. But let's get into the claws. All right, so the claws, the flaps themselves, if you look at the model, they are sold outward. So we can just like, it's already kind of there, but you can kind of just crimp in your claws here to get them wider like this. And just press it in to kind of get it in place. And then you might also notice that the claws thinned out. And it's kind of in the half mark, but you see it's 3D. I'm kind of show how to do that. But first, let's get into the actual claw part. Now, generally, if you've done claws from diagrams before, whether it be an origami lobster or a scorpion by any kind of designer, could have been even maybe a crab, the claw sequence isn't that hard, right? And especially here, we can kind of see we don't have many folds to do. A lot of times you can just either take the claw and swivel it out like this, right? And then maybe thin it in half to get kind of a claw form. You can kind of see this part remains a little bit thicker and curves in. Or you can kind of do something fancy, which it looks like this corner is right there. So you could do like almost like a swivel squash type deal like this. Kind of like that. You can get creative a little bit with this. Swivel this guy out like that, and then thin this, and then rotate this top claw down. So we're gonna kind of do a little bit of combo of both. You can see in the photo here that there is reference to a joint for the whole claw. So we're gonna kind of construct that. I don't think we need this like super fancy spread squash thing. We can kind of just valley fold it like here, and go from there. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do that simple valley / mountain fold, and then we're going to pivot the top flap right around like this unit thing, just a tad, just to get that little mountain fold detail like this, right? So you have just a little bit of a detail there, and then we're going to mountain fold this corner, but we're not mountain folding to fold, we're more just creasing a centered line on the pincher, right? That way it has a little bit of a detail that it is thinner, and we can curl it like that. And then we can do the same thing on the outside. These are kind of smaller details. We can just curl this like this. You'll probably do these more once we're in the final shaping stages, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of it for the claw. And then as for the actual bend, now what we can do is with it swiveled, we can try to fold this in half, which should lock in this swivel just a little bit. We're gonna start folding this in half, and we're also gonna fold along this top crease we made for the claw. And that's going to help us lock that in as well. And as you can see, I'm not really folding all the way. I'm kind of just pressing them into each other. That way, we still have a relatively three-dimensional claw. So it's much less folding, more sculpting this guy into shape. That way he kind of keeps his position. Might be a little bit difficult, but yeah. So feel free, try to work this into your model a little bit to get the claw like this. Take some time on it. Don't go as fast as I'm going. But if anything, we can finish it off in the post section. But yeah, do the other claw, kind of feel that out, and then like fix your legs and we'll do the tail. Small side note here, you might see that I now have the gap between the mandibles. Basically what I did is I just unfolded these mountain folds we had to thin this out, and then I pulled just this tab more this way and then locked that in by refolding these mountain folds, and it gave us a little gap. So go ahead, do that. That's, just a little tip. And again, once you fold something, you don't necessarily leave it permanent. You can always change it with the shaping and whatnot. But yeah, so that's that. All right, so last thing we have for this guy in this part is the tail. Now, tails can be a little tricky on scorpions, so let's just take in some details. So first we can see that the flat body turns into like half a mountain as it goes up. So like this, right? But then the top guy, the top is a mountain. So if you were to treat it like folds from a diagram, it'd be kind of like an outside reverse fold like this. And again, I'm just mocking this out, not actually creasing nothing yet. But that's kind of what we have. And then again, it's kind of hard to see here just because it's white on white. But if you look at the picture, what you should be, there's like a basically thumbprint here, and it curls into a little stinger while thinning this part out a little bit. So let's get all into that. The main part is just getting the start of the tail to go up. And this is, again, kind of like a right about there fold where it's not really a full crimp. There's like a couple mini crimps all the way up. And the key part for this is you want to try to squeeze the layers as tightly as possible. And again, this will be very similar to a lot of the diagrams you've done, but honestly, a lot of the diagrams just kind of say, oh, like pleat here, or crimp here. Then they'll give you much instruction to go on. But basically, I'm going to try to embed some creases as we go up. So I'm both going to bend in like some mountains, just to kind of help us out a little bit. And I'm making these at, basically like if there was to be a triangle here, here, and here, it'd have this big obtuse angle. And that'll help give us a little bit of height on it like this, right? And that's kind of a good place to start. The other thing is when you do this, you can kind of curl the body in like that, just so the back part can kind of go like this. And you're just gonna do that all the way up. And depending on your paper, again, if your paper is a little bit thinner, you can get a ton of these and kind of get little segments along each one. But if you're using a thicker paper, it's probably gonna be risk of tearing right about there. So just be really careful when you do this, but try to do this enough so that you have a pretty decent bend as you're going up, and the creases aren't too evident. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna put in like 2 more, and that'll give us this nice round structure, and then we'll hit it with that reverse, or the outside reverse fold. All right, so I'm back. I actually just put 1 more of those crimps in, and I noticed my tail was already in a nice spot to hit the outside reverse fold. Real quickly, I'll show you guys what I mean by these little crimps. And again, this will change depending on your paper. The thickness, you don't want to pull this in too tight or you'll break the paper in the middle here. But depending on your paper, if it's thin, you can actually mount and fold in a little bit here just to thin out the paper, and it'll keep the shape, it'll lock it. The agua papel I'm using is thick enough in this section. This tail comes from the middle of the paper, so it's the thickest section, but it's naturally holding on its own. So that's nice for us. Great, so now outside reverse fold, pretty simple. Line up the proportions, hit it with that outside reverse, just like this. Pretty standard for any kind of scorpion. And then what you can do is you can kind of thin out the top part of the tail a little bit just by rounding out the sides. This part won't be as thick, so ideally you can almost get it to kind of close up like this. And this is kind of just my preference. This isn't exactly what I'm seeing in Ricardo's, but yeah, it'll just add a little bit of style to it and make the top look a little bit closed like this. Now our last part is we have our stinger. So before we get into it, to me it looks like he just thins it out a little bit, pulls his thumb down, and just makes a nice stinger. So again, if you're familiar with diagrams, this should be pretty trivial, but I'm just going to mount and fold or valley fold in a little bit, not all the way, just like so. That, redo our outside reverse, a little bit thinner. Use my thumb just to press an indent in like this, and then pinch the stinger to make a little bit of a shape here. And yeah, it's pretty simple. You can spend more time on that if you want to make it look a little bit cleaner. Or you can thin it out a little bit more to kind of get the shape, but kind of get the gist of it. Not too difficult for the tail there. And you can kind of make for what you want. Mine's a little bit sloppy, but yeah. And that's pretty much it for this guy. Now all we have to do is really fix all the 3D shapes that we did before. So that includes the legs. Let's try to push those up as much as you can. Right. The claws, in case any of that was undone, they kind of stretched out a little bit. So I'm just going to thin them again a little bit more. Hit that nice angle, and then whatever you want to do for the body or the tail, you can do that just to make it a little bit thinner. But yeah, so that's kind of it. I know this was, again, much more tutorial-y than previous classes, but I really just want to, hopefully, like, again, those techniques will help you out. Just knowing what to do when you have a ton of flaps and you're not quite sure. This is the intro level. There's a lot more techniques that'll happen when you get insects with like wings or spikes or other features, but the principle is generally the same. We'll cover some actual structures in the more advanced shaping classes. But yeah, now I'm going to kind of intro what's the next part. And basically it's, what if you want to do a little custom shaping like this guy? What's kind of the thought process to get to here? And yeah, so look forward to this in the next part. And secret or sneak peek, it involves using glue. So we'll get into that. I'll explain all that. I know that's a little controversial, but thanks for watching. Thanks for following up with this guy. If you already shape with glue, feel free. You can even use glue on this just to harden everything up so that you can get all the angles like this, and close up all the layers here. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in part 3.
All this origami, all this origami, all this origami got me going Kamikaze.